name is Henry Dow. I'm with the Water Restoration Group. I want to thank you guys for joining us for this continuing education class titled Hurricane Operations Panel. We've got some guests present that are going to help us go through the ins and outs, the do's and don'ts of hurricane preparedness. Our panelists are Ben Friedman from CitiQuiet Hurricane Windows and Doors, Darren McDonough from Kent Security Services, and Chad Mackey from Driveway Maintenance. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second, but all of them are very qualified and do a lot of work in high-rise condominiums and commercial properties. And I'm sure most of our audience, that's exactly who they are. So why don't I start out with, well, first of all, this class is an ELE credit or an OPP credit, okay? So I'll start out with Ben Friedman and let Ben introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself and the company. Ben?
Hey, good morning. Yeah, thanks, Henry. Thank you so much for you and your team putting this together. We really appreciate it. We look forward to doing a bunch of these as things shake out here over time. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ben Friedman. I own CitiQuiet Windows and Doors here in South Florida. Primarily, we're a tri-county based company, although we do projects throughout the nation when and if they do arise. I've been in the window and door business since 2006. I've owned CitiQuiet Windows and Doors since 2012. We are a licensed, insured, and bonded full-service hurricane impact window and door installation company. We also work in commercial high-rise buildings with balcony railings when the opportunity arises. I think if you look us up and you do some research on our company, you'll find our big saying is that we provide turnkey white glove service to the end user. We handle all the project from start to finish. We like to say it's soup to nuts. We do not subcontract out any of our work. We work with some of the largest manufacturers in the industry. And again, Henry and your team over at Water Restoration Group, we really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Ben. Darren, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company, please.
Great. Well, thank you, Henry, and thank you to Water Restoration Group for putting this together. Appreciate the opportunity to get together with people and discuss a topic that comes up, unfortunately, too often here in Florida with the hurricanes. I'm the Vice President for Business Development with Kent Security Services. We're based primarily here. Our base is in South Florida. However, we're a national company providing 3 lines of service. We do security services, security officers, technology, so cameras, access control, analytic cameras, and we do provide janitorial service as well. We do specialize in the residential setting, so gated communities or high-rise condominiums. And I've been in the security industry private for about 10 years now. And previous to that, I'm retired federal agent and Army Special Forces officer. I did that for 23 years. So some of that applies to what we're talking about today. Hopefully not too much of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. Chad, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna have that level of credentials, so nobody get their hopes up. Darren, thank you very much for your service, man. It's greatly appreciated. Yeah, I'm Chad Mackey. I'm the Chief Engineer for Driveway Maintenance, Inc. I've been with the company for going on 15 years now. I'm a civil engineer by trade, and transportation materials became a passion of mine long ago. Again, I've been down in Miami. We do things a little bit different down here in South Florida with regard to pavement and pavement maintenance, but the idea is all the same. We do full service asphalt and concrete pavement construction and maintenance restoration. We actually really beefed up just prior to 2009 our hurricane preparedness and disaster recovery division, so that we could better assist a lot of our clients who didn't have anywhere to turn post major storm event. making sure that they have safe access to their community or to their place of business. And so we really ramped up on that with heavy equipment, added in some special attachments to our equipment for debris removal. We've got probably more chainsaws than any asphalt and pavement construction company should own, but we've got them and we've got the resources to do it. So it's become one of our, the nature of the beast, so to speak. It's one of our services that we do offer, but primarily what we're here for is to make sure you're ADA compliant, to make sure that your asphalt and concrete is in usable, serviceable condition, and then to make sure that you maintain that asset over time.
Perfect.
And thanks so much, Henry, WRG, for having us.
You guys very much. Thank all of you. So as you can see, we've got people with a lot of experience in the industry. And today we're going to talk about, again, the ins and outs, the do's and don'ts. And as vendors, we all have experience and we see stuff that's done wrong, stuff that's done right when a hurricane hits. So this is the insight that we want to share with you guys. I'll just tell you a little bit about the water restoration group. It's exactly that. We do water restoration when you're building floods. We take care of drying it out. If you have mold that needs to be addressed, we'll do that, as well as asbestos abatement, which has become a hot topic lately, and a little bit of construction as well. So when your property suffers damage and we have to tear out some stuff, we can also put it back together for you. We've been in the business 15 years, serving nothing but high rises and commercial properties. So thank you very much. So Ben, I'll start with you. Let's talk about before the hurricane. What does an association need to do to prepare when it comes to windows and doors? Or what are the things that you see out there that are done right and done wrong? Or what is it you recommend to all these property managers listening? You're on mute, Ben.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you, Henry. So first, to be clear, what an association really wants to do is, if there's a change in management or if there's a change in board and there's a new engineer per se of the building really wants to be clear which windows and doors, if any, are hurricane code compliant. For those, you want to make sure that these windows and doors, whether they're hurricane code compliant or not, they open and close properly. Why? Because if they can open and close properly, chances are they can lock properly. So you want to ensure that the windows and doors are locked properly in the leading up to a hurricane or major storm, that is. I would check for any failures in the exterior sealant around the windows, around the doors. Perhaps check to see if there's any cracked stucco that may lead to water intrusion. Many windows and doors, whether they're hurricane code compliant or not, have drainage systems built into them, also known as weep holes. You want to ensure that they're clear of any dirt, debris, leaves, or any sand. It's like a toilet bowl. If the toilet bowl is clogged, it's not going to be able to flush properly. Same thing with a window. They're designed to take in water, and then they need to drain out properly. For windows and doors that aren't hurricane code compliant, again, ensure that they're closed, they're locked properly. Find some sort of protection for them, whether it be hurricane shutters that the building has, whether it be a last and worst case resort of plywood. If using accordion shutters as your protection, you should make sure that they open and close properly. Make sure that they lock. A lot of the times an association will neglect this. Many associations have service contracts with their shutter company. So if the shutter company comes out 2 or 3 times a year, make sure that they open and close properly and they lock properly in the event that they're going to need to be used. So, to run back real fast, check the windows and doors, make sure that they are closed, they open and close properly, make sure that they do lock well. This will ensure a good seal. Check the sealant on the exterior, the perimeter. Make sure the caulking is well. There's no failure. There's no void in any of the waterproofing. And to take it, an additional step, see if there's any stucco damage around the opening. Perhaps a maintenance guy can do a quick repair, throw some paint on it, make sure it's watertight for the storm, and then you do the proper repair post-storm.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. I imagine as busy as managers, excuse me, managers and building staff are, it's probably, you know, if you're thinking about 30, 40-story high rise, they're probably gonna have a hard time checking this stuff. But I would say that many of these buildings have units that are already having problems with water seepage even before the hurricane. So that's probably a good unit or units to pay special attention to, wouldn't you say?
Sure. I would, depending on the relationship that the manager or the association has with the unit owners, windows and doors, whether they be owned by the association as common property, or if they are owned by the unit owner individually, would, determine the responsibility of the association leading up to the storm. If the unit owner is responsible, perhaps a notice should go out to the unit owners, hey, make sure your windows and doors are closed, make sure they're locked, check for any issues, report any issues, so that can all be documented pre-storm, so that if there is an insurance claim per se after the storm, you have that information documented prior. And if it's the association's responsibility, perhaps in common areas, lobbies, gyms, card rooms, make that your responsibility to go around and do your due diligence. And again, know what is the association's responsibility and know what is the unit owner's responsibility.
Gotcha. Great point. Unfortunately, we don't have a lawyer or an insurance guy in here, but that's a great point that Ben brought up. I mean, if you have a unit that's already leaking, or there's an issue in there with water seeping in, make sure you document this before the storm, because once the storm hits and now your drywall is affected inside that unit, and as you know, drywall is owned by the association in most cases when it comes to an insurable event such as a hurricane. So now it's going to become your issue. So it's going to be nice to have that documentation so you can go after the unit owner for those expenses related to that because they didn't address the issue they had. So thanks for that, Ben. I want to jump over to Chad, and if you can tell us what kind of preventative maintenance can managers do to ensure the least amount of damage on parking lots and that kind of stuff. Like what steps do you guys go through prior to a hurricane?
Yeah, so, we're really focused on the exterior of the building, obviously. You've got to protect the structure first and foremost, but as far as, it goes, we have a ton of interior lot landscaping, be it a condo, be it a shopping center, that we've got to make sure that we're addressing. And really the best thing you can do from a proactive approach is ensure that all of your big trees, not necessarily palms, but all of your big trees are on a regular pruning schedule. That is the number one reason we see excessive debris, we see property damage, and we see uprooting, is because these high winds can take out a tree if the wind doesn't have space to flow through all those branches independently. So usually when I go to a property post-storm event and I see massive damage and I see uprooting, you see big trees that haven't been pruned for years and years and years and kind of just left to their own devices. And sure, it looks great, but it doesn't look great when that tree is toppled down. So make sure that you're with your landscaping firm and they're doing appropriate, either biannually or at the minimum annual tree pruning for all of those bigger trees. You can imagine that, like a large ficus tree that we had a lot of down here in South Dade after Irma took out hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of utilities, but also damaged a lot of roads, curbs, and sidewalks. And so you've got those expenses coming at you, where if a tree is uprooted and it has a large root system, it's going to damage a large section of your asphalt, whatever curbing was in the island before, and you're going to end up paying thousands of dollars just to have that replaced. So if we can nip that in the bud and prevent that from happening on the front end by doing what we need to do to our landscaping to make sure it stays upright and doesn't get uprooted, that's going to be our primary role there. The second thing that you really want to focus on pre-storm event is you've got a subsurface drainage system. Everywhere you have a catch basin with the grates, stormwater is directed into there. And then it's got a pipe system that helps divert that water either offsite or into a drainage pond to eventually be outlet offsite. A lot of times, especially down here with all of our foliage, those storm sewer systems get filled and backed up with debris, leaves, mulch, any landscape, anything that's been washed in there over time. And God knows what you can find in a catch basin or storm sewer system. Use your imagination. But the biggest thing is those things are only designed for about the 10-year storm event. And that's if they're running at 100% capacity. The less capacity you have, i.e. the more storage is taken up by debris and even muck, you're gonna eventually get a system that's 50%, 20% of capacity. You add a 50-year storm event or even a 25-year event, as we had in Irma, where you have that much rainfall and you've got immediate flooding of the property. And I don't have to describe how intense that can be from a monetary perspective, from an access perspective. So one of the things that I strongly recommend is again, it's a proactive thing. Just annually, biannually, make sure you're dredging your catch basins. That means getting all of the muck and debris and everything out of that structure, and then flushing the pipe system as well. You can either do it by means of vac, flush, or a combination of the two. Vac meaning you send the vacuum down there, it sucks all of the debris out. Flushing is usually the secondary practice, where once we've backed all the larger debris, maybe limbs or whatever out of there, we flush whatever muck out the other side, and then we clean it up on the outlet side, whether that's the pond or the ditch that it's outletting into, so that you have got full capacity to take on that kind of storm. A flooded parking lot will yield years and years and years of maintenance costs and major damage. I always tell people that water is the root of all evil in pavement design and maintenance. If you allow water to pond over the top of your pavement structure for a long time and it doesn't have anywhere to go, it's only going to go into the base material. It's going to saturate that base. It's going to pull organics and contaminants into the subgrade, and then you've got major problems in the future. So let's prevent that flood from happening first and foremost by making sure the storm sewer system is adequately prepared for the event.
Well, thank you very much. I would have never thought of that. The flooding, the debris is a big part of what causes the flood, and I never thought of that. Good information there. Darren,
thank you.
As a property manager, what questions should I be asking a company like yourself or you regarding preparation for the hurricane?
I just want to echo your comment with Chad. Now I know all the things I need to fix at my house. So you just made a nice to-do list for me. All the things that it cause damage at my house. The questions that a property manager needs to ask their security provider up front is, what's the coverage going to be pre and post storm? There's a lot of misconceptions and assumptions out there. The personnel issues that a property management company will experience, or any of us will, pre and post storm, are the same issues that a security company is going to experience as well. How are my officers going to get to work? Is the access to the property going to be blocked? Can the officers remain on property? You need to ask your security provider what is in your contract, review it. Not to say that all security companies are going to absolutely hide behind the language of a contract, but if you don't have a disaster service agreement written into it or as an addendum, they could fall under that force majeure portion of a contract, meaning hurricane hits, the company's not maybe liable to provide the security service. So have that open, honest conversation with the manager from the security company. What type of coverage can I expect on my property? Will the officers be there? Will the officers remain on site? Some of those questions are easily answered. Property managers will ask, can the officers stay on site during the event? The short answer is maybe. Legally, yes, they can, but you can't ask that officer to stay, let's say, in the gatehouse during a hurricane. That's not safe. You can't say, hey, stay in the golf cart that you're normally in during your shift during a hurricane. If you want to provide a hurricane safety approved place for the officer to stay during the event, most security companies will say, yes, we will keep our officers there. Obviously, you have to work out a pay structure for them to be paid for their time while they're there. But if you give them a safe place to be, they will stay on property. So then post-event, when you really need the security, they're there. They can just come out from the provided shelter and resume their duties and start safeguarding the property. However, if the property is in a mandatory evacuation zone, security officers have to evacuate as well. Security officers are not first responders, so they're not afforded that protection. So here in Florida, most counties, as soon as the wind hits sustained of 35 miles an hour, that's the threshold for first responders to be pulled off the road. That's the same threshold for security officers to be pulled out of properties that are in a mandatory evac zone. Most security companies will not violate that statute and keep their officers in a mandatory zone. So those properties that are right on the water, you need to know that going in, that getting the officers out to your property post-event is the same hassles as everybody else. The bridges are closed, the roads are blocked, whatever the issue is, the officers are going to be experiencing the exact same thing to get back on property. So that's the biggest first question that you need to work out with your provider right off the bat as a property manager.
Okay, thank you very much for that. As far as the water restoration group goes, you know, and it's basically what we've all talked about, which is planning. You know, planning shouldn't start, you know, a week before hurricane season, but rather, you know, at the beginning of the year. Every week you need to have meetings. That's what we do. Every single week we have meetings talking about, okay, are we prepared? What do we need? And I think this is what associations need to do, because especially the managers who have so much stuff that they're in charge of and responsible for. It seems like managers are expected to know just everything about a building. So there's a lot to prepare for. So it requires, I would say, 10, 15, maybe 20 meetings to actually be ready for a hurricane. So in our case, it's one, your staff needs to know who it is that's getting called if you do have a flood, because you don't want to have 3 or 4 restoration companies at your property. 2, have a, you know, an agreement, prices agreed to before the storm with a company. And normally when you have a preferred client agreement, as we call it in our company, you're going to get preferential treatment, obviously. You know, when was it Irma in 2017, we had like 100 high rises waiting on us. Obviously we grabbed the ones who have a preferential or a preferred client agreement, put them on the front of the list. So that's important for you as managers to have that relationship with somebody, have those prices agreed to before the storm. Be careful with the people who come in to take advantage of people during a storm. You know, you have out of town companies handling the business here, so just be careful with that. Make sure you have checked your keys and you know, all the doors that they work, because many people evacuate and then you're trying to get in there because there's damage and you can't even get in there. I always tell the managers to talk to the security company, because if you have a lot of water coming into the building and we have to look at 100 units and there's not anybody in those units, we're going to ask that you send security up with us. So we're going to, you know, that's something you need to consider talking with your security company. I'm going to need more security guards. And then Darren, I'll let you talk about, you know, how insurance coverage works in that scenario. But I would imagine the insurance company would pay for such services since it's something needed because of the storm. So I'll get to you regarding that in a second. But those are the main things. And I guess to summarize it, it's just planning. A lot of planning to take place. And if you ever have any questions regarding that planning, we're here to handle that. So while I'm on that topic, Darren, what do you know anything about that on the insurance aspect of this? Because I always tell my managers, hey, request more security. This is part of the loss. You need this to get this taken care of to mitigate the damages. And I would assume the insurance company is going to pay for that extra security. Is this true or not?
Yes, it's absolutely true. It's a really good point, Henry. Where I've actually been in the conversations with the property managers and the insurance companies, because the association will ask for extra coverage that we know that it's going to get excessive on the cost, and they don't already have it in the operating budget. They're not going to drop a special assessment on the community. But then we're talking to the insurance company and they said, yes, the extra security can be billed to the insurance company. Sometimes we actually bill directly to the insurance company as opposed to, you know, waiting for them to get reimbursed through the association. That happens quite a bit. In the scenario that you discussed about, you know, water damage inside the units and then maybe security is the only ones on property, getting a company like yours into the units, security will definitely do that, but that's something that needs to be worked out. in advance, as you alluded to with the planning, because under most scopes of work at a community, security is not going into individual units. That's something we don't do on a regular basis for lots of liability reasons.
Mhm.
However, we need to have that special permission post-event that, yes, we need to go in because we need to shut off water, we need to seal things off, and we need to start the remediation process immediately to keep the cost down of the damage. We will certainly provide that service, but we need to have that permission.
Okay. And another point I wanted to ask, since I mentioned the preferred client agreement in our industry, obviously it's very important for the customers to have something with a vendor. How is it in your industry, Darren? I know you mentioned the disaster services agreement. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that means for the property manager?
Sure. That's along the lines of what you said about a preferred client. For all the property managers that are out there that are listening, that you don't have regular security services, and then you might want it post a hurricane event, trying to find that provider is much like trying to find a company like WRG. You're going to call the security companies and they're going to say, I don't have any extra officers to send because they're taking care of my existing clients. So a disaster service agreement is that look ahead agreement that says we agree on pricing, which will probably be in the overtime or special rate range. If you are an actual preferred client, most security companies will work out a preferred rate that's a little bit lower than overtime, but that locks in your service, meaning you've jumped to the top of the list of who we need to provide for. We're making the arrangements pre-event to make sure that our officers can stay on property if it's safe. We're going to give them water and food and batteries and all the things they need, a hurricane kit to remain on site. And then as soon as the event is over, they're back out on patrol, to include extra coverage if that's what we're going to need to prevent looting and assist, remediation and vendors that need to come in. But it's at a cost that's already negotiated that will certainly be higher than the normal regular rate. Yeah. However, understanding that some of that cost post-event can very easily be billed to the insurance. So it's not as big of a hit on the association as you think. But that's what gets you the guaranteed coverage.
All right. Thank you for that. Chad, I would imagine that when a storm is approaching, you're getting a lot of calls to trim trees, right? So do you have some sort of program like this, or what's your recommendation? Because I would imagine you get swamped with calls. All of a sudden now everybody wants to take care of their trees because the storm's coming.
Yeah, so we do some remedial tree pruning. If something is very specific, or you're in a certain municipality that requires an arborist to manage the tree or to oversee the tree pruning, we work with some landscape specific companies to do that type of thing. But yes, we can absolutely mobilize before the storm hits to ensure that some of the bigger stuff is taken care of and out of the way. Our guys know what to do, and we'll always have management on site with regard to that. But yeah, as far as something that's last minute, we can absolutely help with that. What I would encourage you to do, and I'm not trying to take business away from my company, make sure that you're on a preventative maintenance schedule with a landscape company that's set up to do proper tree pruning. My guys will get your big branches out of the way, but we will not make it look very awesome in the process. Okay, so there's professionals out there that do that handle that type of thing, that we work very, very closely with. So we can certainly recommend those type of companies, and we can, again, do some emergency last minute stuff. But if you're doing it the right way and you're scheduling it in advance, I would definitely utilize a company that knows what they're doing, that knows the type of species of tree they're working on, how much to cut back, and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
Another thing pre-construction that I did want to mention, I forgot about earlier, is if I'm on your property, or if you have another company on your property doing site work, and there's any kind of barricades, whether it's road barrels, cones, or certainly 30-pound A-frame metal barricades, you do not want those to turn into projectiles on your property when the storm hits. So one thing we do is, a week before any major storm is forecast to hit over here, we run around and we collect every single barricade that we've got on all of our properties statewide, and we just let you know, look, I understand, we were supposed to be here, or we're supposed to be working here, but these are the type of precautions that you have to do. You can't do it the day before the storm, because we all know how these things can shift, and all of a sudden you've got 50-mile-an-hour gusts, and it's just not safe for my guys to be out there collecting our barricades. So make sure that ahead of time, if your contractor isn't us, if they're not proactive with you and arranging with you to pick up all the barricades or any stockpiled materials, stockpiled debris that we have on site, you push the scenario as the building manager, as the building engineer, and you say, look, we know this isn't supposed to be here. I need it off site. We got a storm coming.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. Ben, question for you. Are there certain areas that are most important to have impact windows versus others? I'm sure buildings have to make decisions sometimes because of budgets. You know, they want to put some impact windows and they have to choose where they go. Do you run into this a lot, and what are those areas and why?
So good question. The simple answer really is that it's extremely difficult to pinpoint the best areas to put impact windows and doors in, because it's Mother Nature we're dealing with, and we really don't know how a storm is going to impact a building. We do know the most vulnerable areas are corners or units or window or door openings that are relatively close to the edge of a building, the corner per se. Why? You could have the wind wrapping around the building from each direction, thus impacting the corner greatly. The building code actually requires large missile impact windows and doors be used at any opening 30 feet and below grade level. That means that the building code commissioners have decided that there's a greater chance of a large missile or a projectile impacting a window or door opening 30 feet and below grade level. So that would mean that, you know, a tree, a coconut, a rock, a barricade, as Chad mentioned, things like that, hitting a window and breaking it. So, you know, to pinpoint an area, I would say you'd want to look at those areas that are on the ground level, maybe on the second level. Again, very difficult to pinpoint where. It's kind of rolling the dice as to, you know, I'm going to put it there, but I'm not going to put it there. So it's really a guess. Many buildings that don't have funds available or that are not going to vote for, you know, the unit owners to be responsible, they'll start in common areas, a lobby, again, a gym, let's say a card room, a common area. Going back to Darren's comment, perhaps even a guard gate, a guardhouse, you know, protect that so that the people that are protecting you can feel comfortable being protected inside those types of places. You know, like I said, a common area, buildings like to start in common areas. Why? They see that the unit owners find value in that. You know, they put some new automatic doors in, let's say, as an entryway. It looks great. It spruces up the building. Now the unit owners, in turn, if they're responsible for their own units, they start thinking, wow, this looks great. Look at the improvement. Look at the aesthetically pleasing window and door that's in this unit or in this entryway. I'm going to do that for myself. So it may lead to additional people thinking that they're going to start doing a project based on the kind of beautification that the building will do for their own selves. I spoke about the corners. The corners are the most vulnerable area. We work with design pressures. Design pressures are a positive number and a negative number. Positive number has to do with water infiltration. A negative number is pretty much what we care most about here in South Florida, has to deal with suction. So the suction is the window being ripped out of the opening or the window being blown into the interior. So those corner areas have really high negative pressures because that kind of wrapping of that storm around that area impacts that corner so well. You know, I wouldn't vote any area out. You know, the higher up you go, the higher that negative pressure gets as well. The lower you are, the greater chance of a projectile flying around. You know, people ask me all the time, hey, why would I use impact windows and doors at, you know, the 30th level of the building as opposed to use accordion shutters? You know, my answer really is when I'm that high up, my biggest concern is that the windows and doors are installed properly into that opening to provide that level of structural integrity so they don't get blown out. I'm not so worried about a coconut or a palm tree hitting my window, you know, 300 feet in the air. Sure, something may get ripped off of a neighboring building's roof or a railing or a patio per se, but I'm more concerned about that window and door being installed properly in that opening and not getting blown out than I am about putting an accordion shutter up 30 floors above and something hitting that glass and breaking it. So, you know, the greatest example I have really is, you know, not only do we work in commercial, but we also work in residential. And somebody will put 10, 20, 30, $50,000 worth of windows in their house, but they'll skip out on that little bathroom window that they believe isn't going to get impacted by the storm. And sure enough, what happens, that little bathroom window blows out, pressure builds up inside that person's home, and the roof lifts off. And that 10, 20, 30, $50,000 they just spent on the rest of the house does them no good. So again, it's really difficult where, you know, the best places are, but a lot of buildings will start in common areas, lobbies, gyms, guard houses, you know, like Darren mentioned, to really get the building going and in the direction of let's improve our property.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that answer. Darren, do you recommend armed services coverage for a storm event?
No. As a general rule for most residential settings, I don't recommend armed coverage.
Okay.
There's misconceptions on what armed security can and can't do in the state of Florida. It's really a visual deterrent. The rules for an officer actually using that weapon, they're not really authorized to use it to protect property anyway. That right is pretty much reserved for police officers in Florida. So, you know, we have a hurricane, there's damage. Let's not make it worse by having a weapons event on the property. You know, people that are looting, you know, they're trying to loot. They don't want to get caught. So having, you know, decent officers that are going to report and observe and get the police involved is probably the best bet. If you're in an area where you're specifically worried about some serious crimes happening on the property, then maybe. But as a general rule, no, I don't really advocate for armed officers for a hurricane.
Okay, thank you. Ben, back to you again. I wanted to ask you, what's the difference between hurricane proof versus impact resistant, and how does the manager know whether, you know, what they have?
So that's a great question. I want to say that one of the biggest misconceptions in our industry is that someone's hurricane windows are hurricane proof, because really there's no such thing as hurricane proof. We like to set people's expectations up as that they are hurricane resistant. There's no such thing as them being hurricane proof. I wish they were, but they're actually hurricane resistant. An example I like to use is, you know, you have something that's water resistant, a watch, an iPhone, any item that, you know, submerge it. It's allowed, or it's rated to be submerged for 1 hour, your watch, for diving. But you dive with that watch for 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Who knows what's going to happen with that watch? So, you know, it's not a waterproof watch. It's a water resistant watch. Same thing with impact windows and doors. Although the impact windows and doors are designed to withstand a Category 5 hurricane, they're all individually rated, as I mentioned before, for water infiltration and for suction or pressure. Engineers will categorize and determine on a opening by opening basis what the design pressures are. And then, although we need to meet a Category 5 wind speed, we need to know what the design pressure requirement is for each opening to meet and exceed that. So for example, a 35 or 45-story building in Miami Beach, corner unit on the 25th floor, they have to meet and exceed a Category 5 hurricane wind speed. All right. But the same individual that lives on the 10th story of a building in Kendall, let's say, not near the water, not as high up, still needs to meet that Category 5 wind speed, but their design pressure requirement for water infiltration and for negative pressure, which is suction, is far less. Okay. So although the windows and doors are all tested to the current building codes and they have to meet the wind speed, they're all rated at different design pressures, meaning that they can be used in different types of applications. Many engineers will say, and it's unfortunate, and it's kind of a difficult conversation for me to have with people. When there's a hurricane, many engineers will say all bets are off when it comes to their windows and their doors. They allow water to come in, they allow air to come in. It's just a matter of how long that storm is going to last for, and how much pressure and how hard is that wind going to blow that water inside. We'll get calls from time to time, hey, we have sliding glass doors that were recently installed, and the sliding glass door track is full of water and it's not draining quick enough. Mm-hmm. Well, that's because there's so much pressure pushing in and not allowing that drainage system to work properly that eventually the water is going to build up in that track, and then unfortunately it's going to spill over the top and come inside. That's why what we like to do is get people's expectations set and let them know, hey, please make sure your drainage system, your weep holes, they're all cleaned out 1, 2, 3 times a year. Get the sand out, get the debris out, because you want to be able to give that drainage system the greatest opportunity for it to be able to allow water to weep out as opposed to build up and then enter the unit.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that. Chad, I have a question here from one of our listeners. Does seal coating prolong the life of my asphalt? And I guess maybe you can talk about its relationship with a hurricane as well. I don't know if it's relevant or not, but tell us.
Yeah, so it is actually a good question, because yes, seal coating will absolutely prolong the life of an asphalt pavement, especially if it's applied on a normal maintenance schedule. But that's not what we're here to talk about. However, if you have a pavement, I'll give a little example. If you have a pavement that hasn't been seal coated over time, what happens is the top layer of binder, what holds that rock together in the asphalt structure, starts to oxidize. And when it starts to oxidize, you get an exposed aggregate. Okay. So exposed aggregate, if you can envision a nice flat blacktop versus a very, very rough pavement surface that has some loose rock, what you're allowing in that case is you're allowing for more infiltration and percolation of water. Okay, so a lot of people go, after I've newly paved an older parking lot or even seal coated an older parking lot, while sealer isn't 100% impenetrable to water and it doesn't fill cracks, it does give a little barrier between the pavement surface and the elements. So what can happen is, especially if you have a flooded parking lot, you have a big rain event, if you don't have a seal coat down, you're going to have water infiltrating into that super, super dry pavement. Imagine like if you had brand new asphalt, you poured a cup of water on it, and you had a gravel parking lot and you poured a cup of water. Two very different things are going to happen. The brand new parking lot or the seal coated asphalt, that water is just going to flow right over the surface, okay, and it's going to flow in the direction of gravity. The gravel lot, or a very, very oxidized and raveled asphalt parking lot, is not going to allow for that water to stay on the surface. It's going to soak it in. Now multiply that by 4 inches of water on top of the parking surface, and that water is not going anywhere but down. So it's going down into the substrate and soaking through that pavement, which in South Florida is only 1 to 1.5 inches. So you're talking about a very, very small amount of time for it to infiltrate through the pavement, and then it gets to the base, and then you're talking about real problems. We say, and I repeat this all the time in my other seminars, water is the root of all evil in pavement design and construction. We want water to get off of the surface as fast as possible, and we don't want water to infiltrate or penetrate in past the asphalt surface, because then you get base erosion, you get problems that can make major problems over time. So that's certainly something that we want to avoid. And yes, seal coating will certainly help prevent that level of infiltration if you do have a flooded parking lot.
All right, thanks for that, Chad. Unfortunately, our time is coming up here soon. I feel we've got a lot more to talk about, but our 50 minutes are coming up. So I'm gonna just give each one of you a chance to just give us a conclusion or a summary of what you want our listeners to go home with in their head. So I'll start with you, Darren.
Okay. So for property managers, to go back to what I was discussing, I think on the first question, is that communications and preparation. Get with your security provider well before hurricane season and start making the training requests with the security provider, usually in conjunction with your building engineer, so they can rehearse scenarios under the conditions they're going to face post-hurricane, meaning loss of power. What are we going to do with the elevators? What are we going to do for hallway lighting? What are the evacuation procedures going to be? How are we going to direct traffic, pedestrian or vehicle, given there's flooded areas because they didn't do the asphalt right, as Chad was talking about? Is the PA system going to work for announcements? Is there a battery backup for that system? All the life support systems. What does the building engineer want the security officers to do and train on? Because let's face it, when it hits, usually the only person there to protect the property is going to be the security officer. So the training under those conditions is absolutely critical because they can save a lot of money in damages by just quick responses. So we need to go over those systems in conjunction with security. Let them train on it, let them test on it. They'll be better prepared to safeguard your property.
Thank you very much. Chad?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on a Friday. I know you have a lot of things to do with your time, but I think this kind of thing is very important. And if you got anything from any one of us, I think that it was very helpful for you to be on for this hour. For me, just in conclusion, obviously we want you to be prepared. We want you to take those things, but that's in your hands, and you can't always, you can do everything and you can't always guarantee that there's not going to be excessive debris cleanup and things like that. So make sure that you have a service provider that you can trust, that you already have contracts with, you have all their insurance information, all that paperwork is sorted out. They have a vendor number if you're through an association, so that we're prepared. And then we're calling you, you're calling us, hey, I've got you on. If the storm hits Saturday, here's where I can slot you in, okay? Couple of things. When we first show up on site, we're showing up, we're clearing all entries and exit ways, all ingress and egress onto public right-of-way so that you can get access, so that the fire department can get access if need be, and obviously security, police force, if they need to come on site for whatever reason, alarms are going off, etc. So that's what our primary focus is, getting all exterior drive lanes and ingress egress points to public streets open and accessible. We do have pump systems that are readily available if you have a large area of flooding that is standing water and you can't get access because of that. Again, we're going to focus on your access points. We'll pump all the water out downstream to make sure that you can get access to the property. Then it's just a matter of you telling us what matters most to you, what areas of your lot you need open. We'll work around that. Again, we have heavy equipment, more dump trucks than I can even fathom. I think we're up to 30 tandem dump trucks and then smaller trucks. Lots of heavy equipment for removal, debris removal, and we also have about 4 acres that we can store this debris on. When I went through Irma, one of the things that really blew my mind was how much both residential and commercial debris was stockpiled in public right-of-ways, in parking lots, and in areas where, quite frankly, if I'm there, it's foolish for me to move it from here to here. Okay, I take all the debris off site, I take it back to my yard, and then I deal with it after the fact there. Okay, so I think that's one of the things that you got to keep in mind. Don't just, some of these guys will go out there, they'll load up a truck, and they'll go around the corner, and when no one's looking, they're tipping it back and it's going in the right of way. And that's not the way professional services are supposed to be handled. So make sure that whoever's doing your debris removal and post-disaster recovery analysis is doing that soup to nuts. They're taking care of everything on site, but they're also hauling it away to an approved dump facility.
Thank you very much, Chad, for your insight. And Ben, give us a little summary or conclusion.
Yeah, so real quick, Darren, Chad, Henry, and everybody at Water Restoration Group, thank you guys all for putting this together. All the participants, thank you for spending your time here on a Friday, learning about being prepared and planning in the event of a storm, which is an inevitable thing. I'm going to take it back to Henry, which is planning. It's all about planning. Know what you have, know where you have it, know what you need to do with what you have, whether it be a hurricane impact resistant window or door. Make sure it's locked. It's like that old saying, that infomercial, with a hurricane impact window and door, you set it and you forget about it. That's it. It's there. It's all year round hurricane protection. You don't even have to think about it. So that's the beauty of it. But planning, for those buildings that have had impact windows and doors put in, know who the contractor is. Know how old the windows and doors are. Know who the manufacturer of the windows and doors is or was. Know the kind of warranty you have. And really just plan. We as a full service window and door company, we're happy to come out and let you know our opinion. Hey, I'm not sure if that window over there is impact or not. I think it is, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the gym, that was done 3 years ago before I was the manager of the property, is code compliant. So we're happy to come out and take the time to educate you at further length and really help plan for the inevitable, which is this time of the year.
Thank you very much, Ben. And as far as the water restoration group goes, I think Chad said something that I've always said, and I really like it. A service provider you trust. That's the most important part out of all of this, right? You know that they're doing the right thing, and it just keeps a headache off of your plate. Also, after a hurricane, it's no time to be asking for estimates. If you want an estimate for the work, it sounds like there's no emergency going on in your building. So after a hurricane, you can imagine that the water restoration companies are trying to take care of people who have a big emergency at that time. So that's just not a time for asking for estimates for dryouts. Checking your keys, again, make sure that they open all the doors. Know who you will call and make sure your staff knows who you will call so we don't have different companies out there. And then also have a plan for when if you don't have power. After the hurricane, your building has no power, what's your plan? Have you secured a generator beforehand? We can help you with all of that. So we want to thank you guys for joining us. I want to thank all the panelists. All your information was great, very useful. And if any of you listeners need any of these services, these are great people to have in your contact list. And again, thank you very much for spending the time with us on Friday, and have a great weekend, everybody.